No game has tricked me the same way that SOMA has. The way it deceives you is true, what I can only describe as the best use of interactivity in a video game I have ever seen. That may be a bold claim, especially shocking given how normal this game looks. It doesn't dazzle you with any grand tricks like jumping time forward with a blink of an eye. Instead, SOMA uses the most unassuming parts of a video game structure to lure you into a false sense of security. When I first beat it, I was a little disappointed because I felt like I just didn't get it, didn't love it as much as everyone else did. A couple of days later, while writing my review, I had an epiphany. I had made a big mistake. Admittedly, I may just be dense. This isn't the first time the plot of a game has flown over my head, even though I swear I was paying attention. But while my initial misconception may be due to my careless assumptions, this misconception wouldn't have lasted if the game wasn't trying to trick you intentionally.
I basically flipped a coin, and if I had called the wrong side, I'd be rotting away at Omicron.
What I'm referring to are the brain scans, the first of which happens at the start of the game. SOMA follows Simon, a guy who suffers brain damage from a car accident. He agrees to an experimental treatment that involves scanning his brain, and suddenly, you are now in an abandoned facility 90 years in the future.
Hey, you got my brain on file. Maybe you can put it to some use.
What actually happened is that the brain scan copied his consciousness and the copy was activated in this post-apocalyptic future, which explains the supposed teleportation and time travel. Because the brain scan copies his consciousness, there still is the original Simon who remains in the doctor's office. What this means is that there will be two consciousnesses that exist simultaneously, both thinking they are the real Simon, both experiencing life as a seamless continuation from the point of the brain scan.
Not that you would know. I mean, he would still claim to be the right Simon.
This was the mistake that I made, mindlessly assuming that the brain scan was transferring his consciousness instead of copying it. But here's where things get tricky. If both consciousnesses are real, which copy do you play? The decision of which copy you play as is really important for this game, and SOMA understands this. There are a total of 3 brain scans that we experience. The first in the doctor's office, the second in Omicron to acquire the abyssal diving suit, and the last at the very end of the game trying to make it into the simulated Ark paradise. In the first brain scan, the game puts you in the perspective of a new copy 90 years in the future. In the second brain scan, the game puts you in the perspective of a new copy in the diving suit, and in the last brain scan, nothing happens?
I'm still here. Catherine? Catherine?
I'm here.
What the hell happened? What went wrong?
Nothing.
Only at the very end does the game decide that it wants to remain in the perspective of the original Simon. Now, there is a copied Simon in the Ark which we play as in the epilogue, but the previous 2 times that the game switched perspectives really made me take for granted that we will always end up controlling the copied Simon. Except, whichever Simon we control shouldn't matter, they are the same, they are copies, both as real as one another, both equally convinced that they are the true Simon. The Ark seems so perfect. If you could extend humanity even by a little bit, why wouldn't you? I was bought into the idea, so bought in that all I was focusing on was progressing the story. I was the main character, the real Simon that would help launch the Ark and prolong humanity. But this main character syndrome is so insidious. The game gives you control of the Simon that progresses this grand quest. I spent so many hours trying to launch the Ark that it too became my grand mission. The need for a story to progress in obtaining MacGuffins and travelling to different set pieces incentivizes some clones to be more desirable than others, clones that help move the plot forward. That body over there has the diving suit and I want it, I want to control it, even though for the sake of the game's universe it doesn't matter which Simon the player controls. The events of the game's universe will take place exactly in the same way irrespective of which perspective you view it through. The need to progress made me forget that the other Simon mattered. I dehumanized it. Dehumanized him. Just like how Simon does to himself.
There must be something wrong.
Can't you run a diagnosis or something?
What was that?
No, it's just...
Why was it still talking?
This is the only time in the game where you see your old self. Only when met with reality staring back at him does Simon have to reconcile whatever beliefs about personhood he holds. Whatever deep thoughts he had certainly evaporated by the time you reach the arc. Instead of dehumanization, Simon simply erases the previous Simon from his mind.
Catherine! I can't believe we actually made it.
Well, we did.
I'm so relieved.
If this was all the ending showed, I too would have erased him from my mind as well, but no, it doesn't, because this game wants to remind you that every consciousness, copy or not, that you the player and other characters so wastefully discarded is also a person in and of itself. That's why the ending stays in the perspective of the scanned Simon. That's why the game forces you face to face with your own body in Omicron. Think about what it would be like to meet a copy of yourself. It would be unfathomable. There can only be one me, my thoughts are mine and mine alone, and to exploit the attachment that one has to their own consciousness in order to create the disbelief that the other Simons are real people is diabolical, but also genius. It's not just the structure of stories, the need to progress that tricked me. Even the basic controls play a part in this. I'm talking about moving around with WASD, something so trivial, thoughtless for anyone with any gaming experience. Controlling your character is as mindless and automatic as actually moving in real life. It is something so innate it would be unthinkable that you could suddenly lose the ability to walk. In fact, I'm so confident that if you place my mind in another person's body, I would be able to walk completely fine. If you put me in a different character, I would be able to control him completely fine. Even maintaining the same control scheme across the different Simons makes the experience of jumping between copies feel seamless. You may intellectually understand that you're controlling a different body, but controlling it feels so natural that it creates the illusion of a continuous consciousness. The constant flow of awareness that each copy of Simon possesses, which only makes the main character syndrome all the more effective. This is also why the game being set in first-person perspective works so well. The brain scan copies consciousness, sure, but identity is more than that. There is a physicality to it. So what if you just couldn't see your own body? The game largely hides what you look like and you can't look down at your own body. Removing any sort of physical differences between copies likewise makes the illusion of continuous consciousness more convincing. I think it's a good time to say that I don't think these were the intentions behind these design choices. Yes, it's true that the events of the game's universe are destined to happen, but it would be really boring if the game just maintained your perspective in one of the Simons sitting on a chair until the world ended. It would also be really weird to suddenly change the game's control scheme midway through, from WASD to arrow keys randomly in the middle of the game. And putting the game in first person perspective is also just normal. The need to progress the story with MacGuffins and set pieces, the basic WASD control scheme, the first person perspective, none of these are unique to SOMA, far from it. Yet no game I've played gets this much mileage from such fundamental aspects of a video game. I'm not trying to ascribe some genius to these design decisions because there are very obvious and much less deep reasons for making the game in the way it is. But if anything, it's precisely because of how innocuous these decisions are that embolden me to say that SOMA has the best use of interactivity in a video game. Thanks for making it to the end of this video. If you don't know, I actually have a blog that I recently set up which catalogs all the game reviews I've written for the past 65 or so games. Included in that is obviously my review for SOMA, which is linked in the video's description. Check it out if you want to see my initial thoughts on the game after I beat it, or if you want to see my thoughts on the other 65 or so games I have reviewed. Also remember to subscribe, share this video, and hit the notification bell to stay notified for future videos. This video was actually a section from an upcoming video, but it felt too specific and long that I thought it would be better to rip it out into its own video. I've already finished the first draft of that script, although I am worried that it's still gonna take a really long time to release, especially if I do decide to put my face in it, because that's gonna be a whole thing I'm gonna have to deal with. Anyways, thanks for watching and see you in the next video.